Live, we're here. Yay.
Hi,
How's it going?
I'm all right.
Me too. So what cup have you got? Have you got is it different
It's
one?
still, I mean, it's the Little Prince one. I still don't have a lot of cups.
Maybe we'll forget the cup thing because I've got
It's, you know,
I don't know. Coffee gives me creativity, sometimes inspiration.
I think I saw that one.
And then on the inside, yeah, and then on the inside it says that occasionally the jitters or something
Yes,
if I have too much. And the t-shirt looks cool. It's another one of your, what's this?
it's the
Oh
three
wow.
keyboard cats howling at the moon, three keyboard cat moon t-shirt
It's the
that our
lolcat.
common friend Adam got for me a long time ago.
It's not a lolcat, is it? It's is it the one where the keyboard goes like that?
It's the classic keyboard cat, but it's the mix of two old memes that not everybody remembers now. It's just like it's an old geek t-shirt now. There was the original T-shirt has three moons howling, three wolf moons. So there's three wolves at the
Yeah, yeah,
moon,
yeah, yeah.
and there was this whole thing of like thousands of people writing crazy reviews on the Amazon
The
page of that
reviews.
T-shirt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It all started,
yeah,
and that
yeah.
was like the review bombing of people writing, "Oh my god, that T-shirt gave me extraordinary magical powers," and they write like a whole fiction story of the review. And I don't know if that page is still up. Actually, I'd be curious.
I don't know.
And there was a song that was made. Like there's like lots of memes out of the T-shirt, and then it got combined in this T-shirt with the classic keyboard cat video. That is like one of the first,
Very
viral
good.
meme videos.
So today
I
I've
think
got
I
on.
wouldn't be surprised if
I
this
don't know
like
if you've seen
both
this
of them
one.
have know your meme. Oh, what do you got? Super chunk.
Have you
Sloth.
seen this?
So no, this is what's it called? The Goonies.
Yeah. It's a Goonies kind of adaptation rip-off thing, mix up. Chose it especially for teaching tangents.
Cool.
So are you
We
ready
had
for
a
the
week
question?
off. I had a bit of an emergency, really.
Yeah.
But there's another
Oh yeah,
class
we did,
now.
didn't we? Another class. What do you
As
mean?
in, I'm a teacher now. I'm also a
Ah,
teacher.
you are. Yeah, but you're like super intellectual lecturer, university teacher, which is
I don't know.
why
Maybe that's just.
you
I'm not
why are
sure
you
about
making
that.
that face? Well, you're tertiary level education. I'm secondary level.
Okay. I don't know
It's
about the
like
super intellectual part, but I'll accept that I'm tertiary and you're secondary. That's fine.
we'll keep it there. So, are you ready for the question?
Yes, let's go.
The question is, should teachers be allowed to express their political opinions in school?
Yes.
Is that your simple? That's the simple answer.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. Why not? I mean, it's an interesting one. Well, in what way are we talking about?
So I'll give you a bit more context because I just threw into the question there.
Sure.
So we were in a staff meeting at school, and one of the senior teachers said teachers should not be expressing their political opinions in class in front of students and should always maintain a kind of balanced view of everything. I was sitting in the corner of the staff room thinking he was having a go at me because I freely express all my political opinions about anything and about everything, about what's happening all the time. And to the extent where some people assume that I teach politics, which I don't. So it turns out, as
What's
I
the
went and
yeah?
asked him afterwards, and he
Uh-huh.
wasn't speaking about me,
You're speaking with someone
but
else.
he was speaking of someone else. But the official line is, we are not supposed to speak about our political opinions in class.
Whose official line is that? Is that a school or is
The
that a state
school.
thing?
I oh it's a school thing for sure, but I think it might be a state thing. I think it might be
And then what counts as sharing political opinions?
well, I mean,
That's the thing I'm really interested in. And also so I think as a teacher, it's your responsibility. I mean, it's part of your responsibility to share knowledge and to teach to think, right? And
yep,
politics,
I
or at the
agree.
very least, current events, may well be part of that, because you
Mhm.
are an adult that has an influence on what the students or pupils, or whatever level it is, whether it's secondary, primary, secondary, tertiary,
Mm.
are how they're going to be able to see, apprehend, interpret what's going on in their lives, from both a specific view of the topic that you're teaching, or a broader view about life, or in even politics. Now, it's all contextual. If I'm teaching math, there's a specific thing and it's an easy example of like a rational kind of specific set of knowledge that whether politics has no influence on.
Mhm.
You could argue, but I mean, it does really, because it does on the amount that you're teaching, and it does, and there's like a specific, there's a clear, you could argue there's clear attacks on, in many countries, on knowledge itself, and the dumbing down of knowledge, and reducing the amount of um, knowledge needed to be able to pass certain exams or a curriculum, or and you look at where I'm going with this is talking about the states, even to a certain extent other countries, and with Trump, where like it's just a clear expression of a lie goes around the world before the truth has time to put their shoes on, or tie their
Yeah,
shoelaces. That
yeah.
saying, it's just like there's the truth or facts just doesn't matter anymore, and it's full on expressed by the president of the United States, who could just talk about whatever. It doesn't matter at all, has no bearing, um, which is a problem for education overall. I think it's a
I'm
problem
really,
for education.
I think it is too. I'm really intrigued by the phrase you used. The it was like attack on knowledge.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
So for example, I was like putting time to, so these are things that I don't have specific information about. And I had started a project a couple of years ago for myself that I didn't go very far on. Um, and it was, oh, you froze in mid laugh. Are you there, James? No, yes, no, no, yes, no. Oh God, it's no. He's gone. He's gone. I'll have to stitch this one together. I will pause for coffee while waiting for James. I will check if James. I'm definitely going to have to stitch this one together.
Well, that was no.
Hi.
It totally dropped. It totally just it cut out for no.
Great. I thought that I before we started, I was wondering if it was just a slight delay on things, and I guess I will have to stitch this one together again.
All right, real life happens in my lessons. Happens in my lessons all the time.
Happens
So
in
I
your
was
lessons.
yeah. Well,
All
not
right,
like
so I was just about to. Sorry.
you're explaining attack on knowledge, and you don't have any
No,
specific.
what I was going to say was, so when was this? Last year, actually.
Oh, the
Last
project.
year,
Yeah.
the project was, what are my political opinions?
Okay.
Because it's a
Okay.
complex question.
It is. It is. I totally agree. It
It's,
is.
it's if you really think about it, and kids like, or people, anybody watching this, You will notice that most of if you whatever you vote or whatever you like, whether I mean, we can also go into a whole conversation about whether voting is useful and whether democracy still exists and all that, but that's a bit darker and but anyway, for another time perhaps. Um, Not necessarily darker, but just a little bit more controversial, perhaps. Uh, Although what I'm about to say might be controversial, I don't think it is. But most of the things that you might be voting, you talk to a lot of people and you realize that they've inherited whatever they're voting.
Yeah.
And in England and the UK, it's well, it's not great in France. Every system's got their own issues. Okay,
Hmm.
um, and it's just like blue or red, black or white, conservative or Democrat,
Mm.
or Republican or Democrat or conservative or Labor. So it's dual systems. Our world is way more complex than choosing black or white. It'd be great if you could just choose black or white and all the problems of society are solved.
This is
Unfortunately, it doesn't
reminding
really
me.
work that way.
This is reminding me of our mutual friend Connor, the fella. He's at the fella. Check out his Instagram. It's amazing. His pictures are amazing.
Yeah.
He created something called the binary review.
My binary movie review. A movie is either a 0 or 1.
Yeah, 0-1. That's it.
That's a good one. He's like,
if only life was like that.
yeah, I'm not sure life would be that. I mean, computers are like that. I don't want all of life to be like that. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that's a
No,
very nice.
I think I'm taking that back. I don't want life to be life is the joy of grey and mixture of like everything.
Yeah, and sometimes I mean, I think it's life is contradictions. And that's
Yeah.
also what I said in my opening post of my series of posts that I've taken some length with. Is that it's tons of contradictions. Sometimes things are very clearly black or white, and shades of gray at the same time. So anyway, after the European elections, I thought, okay, I should look at what are my political opinions, and I did a couple of those tests. That there are tests that show you like where you are in the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Even that, like most tests, is very incomplete. It's just asking you a few questions,
Yeah.
and it doesn't account for all of the opinions that you have. But anyway, it gave me that generally speaking, I'm to the left of the spectrum. So it was giving things on a grid of like left, right, liberal. I can't remember.
That sounds like the political compass. It's like a left on the political spectrum, as in kind of socialist, right as in more conservative, and then authoritarian or libertarian. I think something like that.
I think that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I did one in English and one in French. The one in French basically told me, yeah, you're a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that. Nobody represents your views. Your views are just fucking weird. Nobody represents them. Sorry for swearing. I apologize. So no party clearly represents your views. I was like, great, fantastic. This is perfect. And so as part of that, the next part of the project was, okay, now I have a fair idea of a broad idea of what my views are. My views are generally that there should be an arbiter to society. That is currently the current one we have is called government. I think it's broken in many ways, but I think there should be one because people are stupid, and people are either dumb or greedy or uninformed or etc. So there should be an arbiter to society to manage how things work in a certain way. I'm certainly not far out libertarian in an American sense, who are like, we need to get rid of government and I'll take care of my own house. And you're like, well, what if it burns? Isn't it good to have like fire response services that are provided by the community, and that's like a thing of society? And I think that healthcare and education should be fantastic and should be freely accessed and affordable for everyone. And I think those two things, and maybe even more, but should be managed by what we call the arbiter of society, and that means generally the government that we have. So and then I thought, okay, so let's pick one thing that I think matters, and I think it matters to society and is a good indication of whether society is working or not, and that is education. And I was like, I don't know anything about education. So what is a good indicator that a particular political party, person in charge, what is a good indicator that education is going in the direction that I think it should be going? And that is a very difficult question to answer. I realized after looking a
I
little
just want
bit.
to say, like, the thinking you do is amazing. So about a
I
year
didn't
ago,
go
you
very
were
far
like,
with that.
you might not, but just the very fact that you're sitting down and going, what are my political opinions? And then you start to explore, and then you start to see what you're coming up with, and you come up with this idea that, okay, education is important. What's the current thinking in education? Now, I don't think it necessarily matters that you didn't get very far. Asking the question and starting to think about it allows you to definitely explore something. So how far did you get when you started looking at that?
Well, I started, so that was the afternoon. So I went, okay, so education budgets, that's an indicator.
Right, yes. So spending on education. Yeah, okay.
Spending on
Yeah.
education. And I started looking, and so actually part of the thinking was, well, I should apply the same thinking process I do for work, because that's what I do for my work. What I do for my work is just ask a question and start questioning things.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So I'm doing that at the moment about my own job. Anyway, I'll circle back to that. So I thought, okay, I did a bit of research online, and I looked at what are education budgets allocated, and what is one number I found quite easily was the number of the money spent per head per student or pupil in a country.
Okay.
And there was like country, and then I realized that it didn't necessarily say much, because, for example, I found out that the United States spends more per head in education on primary education than France or a few different European countries. France was like coming down in the middle of the grid, and then I was like, but I'm pretty sure the quality of education in the States is not that high. And then I thought, well, it's also very different from one school to the next, one area to the next. So then I wasn't sure exactly whether I was like, this is a measure, and it's probably a measure worth digging into, but I don't know if it's a really good measure of how things are going. It's not a bad measure either, but that's kind of like, I think that's kind of where I stopped, and then I decided I needed to do some more thinking about it, and then I didn't go much further. So I also know that one thing that parents say a lot, and I don't know about you, is that the quality of education is going down. But I don't know if that's just one thing that old people say, because I've heard that before when I was growing
Now,
up.
I have a very specific answer for this, and that I made up, because I would get frustrated with the headlines whenever there were public exam results, because I think it would undermine the hard work that young people have put in. Young people are a product of whatever's happening right now. And they do the exams, they do their work, and they get the results, only for a bunch of old people to come along and go, it's not standards aren't as good and aren't as high as they were. So then I started thinking, what we really need to do is a proper comparison. And then there was a couple of programs in the UK where they asked children now to take exams from like the 50s, and they sucked. They couldn't do it. It was really hard. Fine. But you can't do a comparison the other way around. I would like to see a teenager from the 50s negotiate modern life and do an exam now. They wouldn't have a hope of being able to deal with what's happening. You know, like Marty McFly from the 50s now or whatever. I don't think it wouldn't be able to negotiate it. It's how life is for young people now is so vastly different. The pressures, the interactions, the continual need to adapt and move forward is so fast that I'm really glad that I'm Gen X, analog child, digital adult. I'm really glad about that, because I had that experience of tinkering and like figuring things out and all of that. But to be born now, to experience the pace of life, and that having to adapt and have that adaptability of thinking that I think a lot of young people have, I think it's really annoying and irritating. You can't take. I want to take a teenager from the 50s and put him now and see what happens. Like they
That
wouldn't survive.
yes, and it doesn't mean that we can't question what is being taught.
Yes, yes,
right.
yes.
So,
Totally agree.
another example, when I was in junior high school, or middle school, sorry, we had, and even primary school, I think we had civic education. Civic education is a form of politics. It's explaining how the country works. And France has a very specific way of approaching the concept of nation and state that is different from Anglo-Saxon countries.
A very rich history of philosophy and thinking about politics, everything.
And so I recently learned that about that concept of a nation that is very French in itself, and so and about secularism, which on one hand, from the English perspective, it seems like, and because it sometimes is, to be honest, very intolerant and very racist, or underlying racist. But where that comes from is the concept of a nation, that is to say that in France, the French system considers that to create a nation is the will of the common group. And the will of the common group supersedes race, supersedes origin, supersedes community. Except that if you don't explain that to young people, then it just looks like oppression. Also, because sometimes it is.
Yeah, I get it.
If you don't explain the political system, actually, that's another thing. I just opened a tab to go into like defining politics, just so we're clear with anybody watching this. Politics is the art or science of government or governing, especially the governing of a political entity such as a nation, and the administration and control of its internal and external affairs. Internal external affairs are also people, by the way.
Yeah.
So there's a wide array of what it might mean for a teacher to share his political opinions. So I got into whether concepts of politics and the way that a nation functions should be taught in school, and I do believe, now that I'm a grown up, that there are a lot of things that should be taught in school, because who's going to teach that to kids? And in France, it used to be a thing, and now that no longer exists.
Civic studies, is that what it was called?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore.
No, I don't. Does that exist in the UK?
Not really. No.
So how are the children going to? So children come from, just like in France, right? Of course, come from a varying economic and socioeconomic background. Sorry, socioeconomic background and class. Okay. So children coming from a higher class socioeconomic background are going to be taught those concepts by their parents. Just like those parents are going to help them write better. They're going to help them with all sorts of stuff.
Learn how to write the essays, like you were saying in one episode, where if you knew how to write the essays, it means you could get the better marks, it means you could get to the better schools.
Yes. So they have the keys. Well, they don't necessarily realize they do, right? They may or may not. So anyway, that's all me saying that I think concepts of politics and the way that a nation functions should be taught in school and should be part of a curriculum. Now, sharing your political opinions, you are a person, you and the teacher is a person of influence in the student's life. And so I think they are justified. And then it depends on the topic, of course. So I agree with the idea. This is where the shades of gray come in. You're like, we should be objective or objectively biased. Sure, why not? But the truth is, we aren't. Nobody is.
Yeah.
We are biased by everything we're going to be saying and the way that we do things. And you are given a whole class of pupils, students, and you will be subjective, because just by virtue of you being there teaching the topic.
Yeah, the metaphor I like for explaining that is the lens through which I see life. Sure. It's going to be, it's my upbringing, it's whatever's happened to me that I've put together. So I'm going to be looking at things a certain way. It kind of relates, but for me, I sound white middle class, but I look like an immigrant, potentially the stereotype of a terrorist. But that kind of mixture, juxtaposition has given me a different outlook on things, I think.
Yeah, I'm
And
funny as well because
being
I
aware of
look
that is
I
really
look.
important.
Sorry, yeah.
Being aware of where your own lens is, I think, is a really important concept. And
I agree.
a lot of the young people that I teach don't realize that they think that's the way it is. And probably some of my colleagues as well, right? And the
Well,
adults I know, they
yeah,
don't
of course, a lot
realize
of
that
adults think that, and I've talked to adults who are like, yeah, I don't want to know all those things. You just go and do things. And a lot of people who vote don't want to know how complex the world is. They just want simple answers to the
yeah,
simple problems I have in
yes,
my life.
yeah.
And this is just taking us down the same route we just keep going on. And this is what this show is about teaching and about providing different ideas and about saying, like, go read books, go read articles, go find out more about the world so that you make up your own mind. And I'm a firm believer that we share information in conversation rather than
Mm.
closing options and just saying, like, I want the world to be simple, and closing off options is it's not doing justice to, well, the complex beauty of the world, I guess,
And
in a weird way.
in class, they sometimes they want an answer, partly because I'm teaching to an exam, but
Yeah,
I'm grateful that the subjects I teach, so business and psychology, allow me to explore bigger questions in a way that I think other subjects, maybe maths, don't necessarily do, unless you kind of get creative with how you teach, which is something we're trying to do in our school. We're really trying to explore and give young people the space to question and learn how they think so that they can question things in a way that allows them to make sense of how interesting and messy life is.
yeah,
Because that's what interesting and messy. I think that's what life is. It is just a mess and interesting.
yeah. Yeah, and it's complicated, I imagine, because you have to prepare them for an exam, and they're probably concerned about succeeding at their exams. And you're like, somebody might go, "Okay, great, thank you very much for your great reflections about life, but this is not useful for me to get an A."
Oh, that's happened. That's happened. I had one pupil a few years ago who said, "Can you just tell me what I need to do to get an A?" And my response was, well, you've got to be able to think and express big ideas in a really straightforward way on paper. Because ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Because I just pose questions all the time, and they sometimes they really, really don't like it. Or I've got better at saying, I can't give you a clear answer to that question because it depends. And what it will depend on is the context of the exam question or the particular case study that they have in the exam. And sometimes I get annoyed when teachers will teach things in a very formulaic way and say, well, if you do that in the exam, you'll get a mark. And then they wonder why they don't get a mark. So I try and stay away from that and try and think about principles. But throwing in a political like firebomb to the lesson creates engagement. It gets them thinking, and they realize there's no straightforward answer to a 25 mark essay they have to write about globalization, which is like something I was talking about with the older students. There isn't a straight answer to that.
It's tough one.
So I
I
quite
was wondering in my class about, and I need to do this for Thursday because I kind of just, anyway.
no,
So
ask it.
two
I
things.
want to know. Tell me.
I gave
I can
them a
probably help.
Pixar. I gave them a Pixar analogy, as I like to do. I don't think they were very impressed with that.
Oh, I do. I make
I'm like,
references to
all right,
stuff,
fine. Next time I'll just talk about brands. Okay.
but I make references to stuff, and maybe you'll start to discover this. I'll throw in a reference to something that nobody gets, and then I'll throw in a reference to something else, and I'm shocked that somebody gets it because I think they won't get it, but they occasionally they do. I'm like, wow. So, and then sometimes I'll find there's a specific pupil who will get everything I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, of course, but I think you might have to be careful about that. You might say something that you think makes complete sense to you, and you come up with this great
Oh
metaphor.
yeah, I'll
And they'll
definitely
go,
have to be careful
"What?
about that.
What are you
Um,
talking about?"
but that anyway. So I was thinking on the grading that. So I totally get what you're talking about in terms of us. It's difficult to put grading system, but I was wondering about trying to give a fair idea of how I'll be grading what I am asking them to do,
Mm-hmm.
so that they have a sense of it. Because
Mm-hmm.
so to be specific, the class I'm teaching to the second year students is called Digital Brand Environment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I defined what an environment and what a digital environment was from like broadly last
Mm-hmm.
class, which I
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of glazed eyes at some point. I think, I'm not sure entirely. They
Don't let that put you off. You'd be surprised. It looks like glazed eyes,
I don't know.
but
I have very little experience, so I'm like, I don't know if I'm
no,
this is
it's
good or not.
amazing. It's amazing. Sometimes I'll be explaining something, and I think they have no idea what I'm saying, but they do. It's shocking how much they get. They will surprise you.
So next week I'll go into exercises and defining um, how do you assess a digital brand environment.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll go into things like um, what can you say about what the brand's objectives are through what you see on their digital environment, and it's going to be more so about questions of what can you learn and what insights can you learn through looking at their digital environment.
Okay.
So meaning, rather than saying this is what they're saying on their Twitter, this is what they're saying on their Facebook, which is one level, I want them to get that, but I want them to go past that to go into, okay, what is the tone of voice,
Oh wow.
what
Yeah.
is it about the brand, who are they talking to, etc., those kinds of things. What is an insight that is really interesting, because it's quite practical, and anybody who starts in a job, though, so these students are studying communications and advertising, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some
Mm-hmm.
of them are interested in fashion, some of them are interested in other marketing studies, but they're doing a semester of this class, etc. Anybody who starts working is very likely to start doing to begin by being given research assignments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It makes sense.
So research assignments is more than just going to take a screenshot at a Facebook page and saying, here you go, it is the first level of saying this is what's happening. But then the person who's given the research assignments is like, all right, what can you tell me about this?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I intend to teach them or to give them an idea of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then some thinking. So, for example, in the last lesson, we started looking at, all right, what constitutes the digital environment? So we defined environment, we
Perfect.
defined a digital environment, and we talked a little bit about Apple as a way to illustrate things because everybody's got an
Ev-
iPhone. So I'm like,
just always in the same in my class when I talk about think of a company, Apple. It's
I
like it's
did that. I
always
did that
Apple.
at the first class.
It's always Apple.
I know, but I know it was very obvious that the reason why I did that.
Oh, you. It's fine.
I do have a reason.
Yeah. 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 I
One,
don't
it was
always.
class one. Two, it was. I had asked them earlier if they think that whether it's important for a brand to be present and active on social media. Then we talked about other stuff. Then I asked them
Mhm.
how many of them had iPhones, like everybody but one person, and tablets and
Really?
MacBooks
No
and anybody.
Androids?
I had like one class. I wrote it down. I think there was one or two. Very little.
Okay.
Androids are much more present. Anyway, doesn't matter. Point being, Apple only got into social media very recently, and they control that very, very sparsely. And two, the digital environment is in your hands. Like, you don't even have to go on a website to be as part of Apple's digital
Yeah.
environment. They make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they manufacture.
Mm.
And then we had interesting conversations on, all right, the Apple Store, is that part of their digital environment?
Mm.
And part of my conveying was that I don't care what you think is part of their digital environment as long as
Yeah.
you can justify it.
That is the nail on the head.
So,
That
and then
is
somebody started talking about the employees and their service, et cetera. And I was like, well, if you focus on the employees, their service, and the way they're dressed, that's probably not specifically a digital environment. However, if you tell me about their tablets, the appointment system, what the employees are doing with their tablet, that would be part of the digital environment.
there's a huge overlap between what you're saying and what I do. Huge.
Okay.
So I've got a few comments about this because your question was, how do you know
We're gone on
whether
a
it's any
tangent
good?
compared to politics, but anyway.
But no, I don't worry. I will link it back to politics.
Sure.
So Your question was, how do you know whether it's any good? Or how do you assess it? I think it was.
How do you assess it? How do you assess, so that when you do a research project, and I think this is where I'm going with them or anybody, and it's just the first level is to learn to reproduce something and just like regurgitate it, right?
Okay.
Then the second is to give me some thoughts on it.
Yes. Okay. So I have some very specific ideas in this.
I do this a lot. That's good.
You also do that a lot.
Yeah, I do. Anyway,
So
come back to it.
A lot of exam boards build their syllabus around Bloom's taxonomy. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, that sounds interesting.
So it's like core to everything. It's everywhere. It's a triangle. At the bottom is knowledge, and these are traditionally assessment criteria for an exam. Do you know what you're talking about? The way you show that typically is the terminology in a sentence. The next level up is, can you use that terminology in context? The next level up is, can you show some reasoning, a series of points that link together? Can you analyze something? And the highest level is a judgment, a reasoned, justified conclusion based on what you're doing. Now, like I use that a lot. It makes it really clear to the pupils, okay, this is where I'm at. Because if the question, and then it comes down to the question, if the question was, to what extent is globalization influencing whether a business can operate in multiple countries? That might be a big essay question. Globalization, business, multiple countries. To answer that, you really have to, you've got to show the examiner, okay, do you know what you're talking about? Are you using terminology? Do you have examples? Do you have a series of points that link together? And then does the judgment that you're making make sense? And sometimes the pupils will ask me, is this right? And I will say literally what you said. I don't care as long as you can justify it. As long as I can see how it makes sense, I don't mind. The older ones, like 16, 17, 18, they're like, okay. And then they're like, how do I do that? The younger ones who are like 15, 16, it's harder for them to really get that there's no right answer. It takes them a while to get it, and I have to really show them and model it. And that's why I like the tangents. That's why I like the conversations and questions that don't have a set answer.
Yeah. So it's a funny one, because you remember I mentioned that in another episode when we talked about it, is that for a lot of the students that are coming from a traditional French environment, there is a right answer.
Yeah.
Which is something I never understood, and I didn't get the best grades because of it.
You were thinking about a goal from like, I don't get it. There's no answer to this. You can't say that. You need your answer, which comes with maturity and understanding and being able to articulate it. But yeah, so that's one bit. And then the other bit you said about how do you assess it? So one thing I think is really powerful is knowing what a good answer looks like.
Yes. So that's one thing that I have to go through and show them. It's more work for me on that side.
So I did it. One of my classes, I got them to create an essay question, and I'm going to answer it. I'm going to show them my thought process, show them how I got to it, and then show them. And I'll write it in very simple language, but the way the concepts hang together is sophisticated. The insight that comes at the end is like, it's impressive, and it should be, and then like, whoa. And then as we go through the course, I will knock one together in 20 minutes. And every year they're like, how do you do that? And I say, because I read books. And every year. But politically, being able to, I'm making sense of the political environment, I think comes right down to, how do you negotiate your thinking process? How do you articulate your thoughts? Which I think links to Rome as a tool. And that Twitter thread you sent me about how we keep our notes, how we represent our information, creates our understanding of the world around us. And if we've got a really great way of understanding all the information we have, we can make sense of, who do I vote for? What is my political opinion? Where do I stand on this issue? And the more that I can express that thought process in class, the more hopefully I can create young people who are willing to engage in the political system. Of course, I will say deliberately outrageous things like tax the rich, at which point my entire class goes, no, you can't do that.
Really? Wow,
Yeah.
your school is fantastic. Every time you talk to me about that, I love it. Just the
Yeah.
kids are already like, no, you can't tax the rich. Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we should eat the rich, frankly. But
See, if there are any of my pupils watching this, you see, this is where like I don't think I'm saying anything controversial. So I will also say in class,
tax the rich is not massively controversial at all.
it is in my school. This is what I'm dealing with. The other thing I'll say is I'll say other things like
It's a good thing that you're there. There needs to be some other balanced like
now
views.
this goes back to the core.
So wait, actually,
question.
the dude asking the
core
question, or the dude or the person, woman, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't want to be sexist about this.
Dude can be female, right?
Do you think they meant specifically political party and election opinion, or wider political opinions about, you know, whether we should tax the rich?
I think both.
Because taxing the rich is not about. I mean, it's. Do you think Google, Amazon, and Facebook should pay their taxes?
Now, okay, so when people,
I mean, this is a rhetorical question. I think they should, and they don't. But anyway.
Yeah, but. So when some of my colleagues will go, "Oh, I'm not buying from Starbucks because they don't pay their tax," I'm like, "Okay, fair enough." But the problem isn't Starbucks. The problem is the political framework that allows them to avoid paying taxes legally, in my opinion. So, like, and I say this in class, some politician comes out and goes, "Oh, we need to reform the tax system," and then like make sure that corporations and people are paying their taxes. The entire media and the kids I teach will jump on that person. Oh, he's a socialist, he's a communist. Yeah.
Why do they think that's wrong?
I think it's partly because of the school I teach in, the area.
I mean, clearly they didn't grow up in the same kind of environment I did, but
it's like, so they got parents they got rich parents. I teach in a private school. They got self-made parents as well. And yeah, if any talk of anything vaguely left is like jumped on. So what do? I respond to that by being even more over the top about it. Right. And my rationale is balance. Like I will go on about Karl Marx all the time. Oh, so you're a communist. Communist failed. No, I'm not a communist. So these are the discussions I have. So that are my.
I need to read Marx. I've never actually read him aside from like a little bits and pieces in high school and philosophy class.
I want to read.
And actually, one of my big gaps is I read. I just was talking about that with my brothers and sisters. Well, my siblings basically. Chomsky. Chomsky is another one I really need to read.
Oh, have you read Chomsky? I tried reading Manufacturing.
Did you say you hate that guy?
No, I think he's amazing.
Yeah, he is.
I tried reading Manufacturing Consent. It's the only book I started and didn't finish. It just, I found it like tangential and like deep and referential and at the same time incredibly scary.
But he's scary. I watched an interview of him from last year, and I thought I really, really need to read Chomsky. And I talked about it with some friends of mine who were like, "Yeah, you really need to read Chomsky." Strangely enough, I seem to be associating with people in France who really like Chomsky as well. So
it's good. Know. So
So what do your pupils think? Like, why do they even watch this? Like, do they? Because if we were to think that we should not share anything, then shouldn't you share? I think wealth should be shared. I think whatever you have, it's part of your responsibility to share it back. Because the way that you got it was thanks to someone or something in society. And I think we make society together. And yes, it's very lefty, even communist, to be thinking ideas like that. It's not necessarily communist, so that's arguable. But certainly socialist in a way that I think we share and we work and we live and we grow and we thrive and together.
So this is the other thing that is incredibly controversial, saying that, and we talked about this, saying that money doesn't bring happiness. So I've started to be a bit more nuanced and just rather than just blanket saying money doesn't make you happy. And I started to explain the fact money makes you happy up to a point. And then after that, having more money doesn't make you any more happy. And my older pupils are beginning to understand this finally. And then I start going about taxing the rich.
But you're giving me a little bit more background on where they come from, and I'm not used to that kind of indoctrination. I'm used to the other kind of indoctrination called like we should share.
Well, this is why I love my job. I get to stand out and be seem like a complete leftist nut job in service of educating them in a syllabus and how to think. And I think to go back to the question, should teachers be allowed to express their political opinions in class? Yes. And
it's kind of like it's a
something.
famous area. I mean, it's almost it's a trope and a stereotype for there to be some teachers sharing political opinions to open and broaden students' horizons. I mean, it's like it's put into movies and all sorts of stuff.
I am that trope. Maybe. I like to think I am. And then maybe someday I'll be walking out the room and some kid will stand on the chair and go, "Oh, captain, my captain," or some rubbish like that. I don't know.
My sister told me she watched Dead Poet Society again and that it really works. It ages well. I haven't
watched
seen it in ages.
I watched it relatively recently, and I loved it.
Yeah,
I loved it. I mean, I have had things happen when I went to your 40th. I was talking with a bunch of people there. Your 40th actually shifted. Is where the 180 began to happen about going from I want to leave teaching and I hate it to actually I'd be mad to walk away from it and I've got something cool that I'm doing.
cool.
The conversations around your party made a difference to me. And getting a card from one of my ex-pupils, the opening line on the card was, "I really, really, really hate to admit it, but you were right."
What about just everything?
Not everything. I think it was more the way I think, the approach, the questioning, the know yourself, everything we talk about on this podcast, basically.
Yeah.
And that was very liberating. So, and then being a facetious, awkward foil to all their opinions, and having and I think you'll start to provide this to people too. But it requires a high degree of self-awareness to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And almost satirical as well. I love satire.
And that's why also it's good that you have those kinds of things, because otherwise, I mean, it's normal that the main influence on their thinking up to then is probably their parents.
Mm.
And it's not wrong, but it's good to have different views. I think.
And their peers. I think, isn't there a whole thing that first it's your parents, then you go to school, and you start to break away as an adolescent, and it's your peers become really important.
And I think some of the talk is that I don't know. I wonder. I don't know if I might be making this up, but that you interact and come across different kinds of thinking or origins and everything else. But the truth is, more and more, you go to school with the same people as you are hanging out with. There's not really so much mixity anymore.
I agree. That's why university.
I mean, I don't know if there ever was. Actually, I say anymore. I don't know if there ever was, but
university was a huge liberation for me because I got to meet people who. It was the first time where somebody said to me, it's the first time where I experienced the look from someone, and he's now one of my best friends, and I'm still in touch with him from university. He couldn't get that I was massively into heavy metal and brown. This is in the 90s, right? So it's 1995, 96. And he'd never seen that. He'd never seen a brown heavy metal fan. He wasn't exposed to it. At which point I was like, okay, I have a job to do here. And we're really close friends. And university, I mean, I don't know what it was like for you, but is it really about studying, or is it really about the people you meet and the conversations you have? Being up till 4 a.m, talking about random crap, that was university for me, as well as a bit of the reading and studying.
Sure.
Is that what it was like for you?
Not really. I mean, it was, a little bit. I didn't stay in university very long. I didn't.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's not. I mean, I still did 2.5 years. But it was definitely learning. Definitely some conversations like that. That was not massively different from what I had experienced before for me.
Okay.
Definitely meeting people from different places and horizons, but they were kind of the same as, it didn't feel different from what I experienced in high school.
But I would like to know then, so back when you were in high school or when you were first going to university, the idea of taxing the rich, would that have been like, was that
I grew up in a very lefty, radical, anarcho-syndicalist kind of environment. So taxing the rich would seem like totally normal. Plus,
Okay.
I mean, it's like nothing shocking to me. I'm like, well, yeah, they have more, so why wouldn't they participate more? Now,
Have you
now
seen?
I'm a bit grown up and I'm a bit more circumspect about the idea
Mhm.
of, well, wait a minute. If it's a percentage, then if everybody contributes the same percentage, the rich would contribute more, and technically it should be okay. Uh, so there's a bit more thinking on that side of things. And actually, I mean, I would need to look a lot more because I know it's very complex. And
Mm.
it's just like we said earlier, some of the big companies and very rich people don't pay their taxes. And the problem is not that they should be paying more, it's that they don't pay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the richer you are, the more influence you have, the better you can get out of your obligations, or if we call them obligations. So the
Have
more
you heard
money
of
you get, and the more money you get, the more free lunches and free passes you get to game the system.
Have you
And
heard of
that just makes my blood boil. I
me
don't,
too. Me too. Have you heard of French economist Thomas Piketty?
yeah, a little bit. And I heard about him. I heard a couple of his interviews. I haven't
So
read his stuff exactly just yet.
his book is amazing. It's amazing. And then this other amazing site, I think I sent to you at some point. Someone has done a website where one pixel represents $1,000, and you scroll and they from left to right, and they've represented Jeff Bezos's wealth, and then the wealth of the 0.0001%, and how and when you see it represented physically, it's shocking. It's because you can't comprehend it. And the other thing our mutual friend Adam said, go to like Alexa or Siri and ask how long is a million years, how long is a billion years, how long is a trillion years, and realize just how messed up inequality is.
I listened to a really good long form interview on a French channel with an economist yesterday. It was a 2 hour long interview with an old economist who's worked across Europe. And so the channel is called Thinkerview for anybody who listens in French, because it's very French. And they're the environment, the guys producing the channel are hackers. So they're very clear on they're very open on their political opinions, but they invite everybody. They really they invite a
Okay,
lot
cool.
of different kinds of people to talk. And so they finish each interview with like 3 books that you recommend, that the guest would recommend, and a piece of advice for young generations. And
Nice.
this advice that was given yesterday really struck me. I was like, whoa, okay. The advice that dude gave, who's
And
called
this is an old
Jean-Paul
guy, right?
Fitoussi. Yeah, he's 78.
Okay.
78. He said, don't be an employee. That's the advice I got for young generations. Just don't be an employee. Be your own person. And the interview said, so create your own company. Well, be independent, or if you create your own business, be very clear that you be a good person to the person you're employing, and be very clear that you don't have human resources. Human resources are things. What you have are people. Don't treat them like resources.
Oh, that's great. That's so
So there's
great.
a part of the interview he goes on about, he just published a book about how what we call what's called neuf langue in French, so the new language,
Mhm.
new language in France and in England. I mean, everywhere, right? But it tends to pick a lot of stuff from English and like Franglish it.
Mhm.
It's not only because of that. It's usually it's anything that we use to change the way that the language is being used and the effect of that. So just like at one point he says, well, some people used to be called personnel director, and now they're called human resources.
Yeah.
And he goes on to talk about human resources and to say, like, we've dehumanized people.
Yeah.
So he talks about all the other stuff since then that changed society and lead him to technocratic, just, dehumanizing everything and normalizing all sorts of stuff for the very, very rich, and or the people just gaming the system. Because there's a whole other side of politics and government. So I do believe there should be an arbiter to society,
Mm.
but the kind of dystopian view and futuristic view that you might find in science fiction movies is already there. You talk about Jeff Bezos and people who have enormous amount of money. The influence they have
Mm.
on our society
Mm.
is mind-blowing and mostly invisible.
Mm.
And there's a whole body of people who say that, well, the democracies are broken because not all of them, or not all of them in the same way, okay? Because we asked to go vote for something or someone, but really all the influence is already wielded by somebody else elsewhere,
Mm.
and that the expression of just going to give your ballot every few years doesn't really change anything to the fact that the system is rigged.
Do you know, I think younger people
And
have
like, whatever your political opinions are,
yeah.
so
I
you can
think,
still think that we should not tax the rich and that all the rich should get their way, and the system's still rigged. And what I would say, like, is that a good system?
and
What
I
system
think,
should we have? And
I
all I
think,
have are the questions right now.
yeah, which is great because the questions open up the thinking. Because I think younger people, certainly the young people I keep meeting, I think they intuitively understand what you're saying there. They get it, but they don't have the maturity yet to articulate it the way you just did.
But I think young people are angry and just like suspicious and thinking they can do better just as a matter of being young people. That's kind of normal. And I think some of the stuff that is closer to what we talk about and of importance to the young people immediately,
Hmm.
and we touched upon that topic, and maybe we'll come back to it some other points in future conversations, is to understand clearly how how they're how the digital social media platforms and businesses they're
Hmm.
using
Hmm.
are influencing them or
Hmm.
gaming them,
Hmm.
without even going as far as the politics. Something that is worth being very clear about is to
Hmm.
know how your phone works, how Apple works, how they get their money, how Facebook works, how they get their money, how YouTube works, how they get their money, etc. And then maybe you can go into looking at politics and voting, etc. And that's and I say this from a very humble perspective of not being understanding much, and like having taken one project of one topic of education and realizing in a few hours how complex it is. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I don't, what does it actually mean to have a
Hmm.
good education system? How do I know whether the candidate, which candidate or which party is doing the right things for that? I don't
Hmm.
know. It's really difficult to answer.
Hmm. Very good. You linked it back yourself there to the whole theme of the entire conversation. I,
Yeah.
I like, I really like the advice that guy gave because it's something I've started to discover for myself and find really difficult because my dad worked in the same job for over 30 years. And that thinking of how you succeed at life, get the same job, get married, buy a house, have children, has been upended and thrown in my face. As you know, my trajectory in life hasn't been like that,
Yeah,
and
me neither.
I'm now left with thinking I want to be in. I want to know that my skills and my creativity and what I have to offer is valued, and that I can make a living from it. And then how can I communicate that to younger people to leave them empowered in their own way, which relates to so much of what we talked about, like ikigai and knowing yourself and
Yeah.
reading. But that's I think I'm gonna have. I wish I could speak more French to understand that conversation.
There's a lot of really good conversations on that channel, and I've been learning a lot more about what's going on in France, and they purposely talk about international matters big time,
Mm.
which is good too, of Europe and what's going on in Europe and what's going on in politics, and how, and now I'm starting to understand why there's a lot of smart people that want out of the euro and out of Europe,
Mm.
not because of the
Nationalistic fervor.
nationalistic anti-immigration, not because of the red bus that was said we could save money, no, not because of that, but because, so in that particular interview the dude was saying, well, we should, right now we've created a money that no sovereign country has an influence on. The European Parliament, the people are not voted in, they're
Yeah,
named,
yeah.
they're not there, so it's not democratic. and we don't, our money, the euro doesn't belong to the countries that created it. It belongs to private banks. So he's like, so we need to take it one step further. We either need to get out or take it one step further. So it needs to be a real federation, or it needs to be destroyed because it's only private financial interests, or the interests of particular political opinions that are. And I'm not doing justice to the complexity of the conversation, that I didn't understand everything that was going on.
I think it's
everything is so difficult because when you start saying those kinds of things, you're immediately taxed as like a super extremist, either left or right crazy person.
But this is what.
And if you doubt anything, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
I was talking with my little brother, and I can't remember. I don't think I mentioned it. I might have mentioned this last time. He talked to people, friends of friends of his, who came for dinner. And there's a lot of people who do not want to have thrown in their face that question those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And if you question anything like that, you're
this,
automatically dubbed a conspiracy theorist, and the person just closed out the conversation. I am unwilling to talk about that.
Yeah.
And that is anything to say that, there are private interests at risk, or the media is biased, or anything that is just a little bit uncomfortable to anybody's worldview and beliefs. To go like blanket, I don't want to talk about this, you're a conspiracy theorist, that's it.
And I think that's what I value about what we're doing here. And both from a personal level of talking to you and getting to explore really cool stuff in a conversation and questions. I think teaching Tangents is also very much about presenting questions and allowing younger people the opportunity to explore something that they wouldn't normally, and then go off and investigate in their own way.
Yeah.
So it's not that we have answers, and it's not that we're going to give answers. It's more about how do you explore an interesting question in an interesting way to see what avenue it goes down. And I think you just said it brilliantly. I think there's so much more to explore, and it looks like a really obvious thing politically because of the way it's been presented by the media, and everyone is inherently biased, but there's so much more to it if you're willing to dig.
Yeah.
So I think that might be a good way to end it.
Sure. Great.
Cool.
I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.